In this video, surprise, surprise, Austin Claybrook is back again to talk about RPO, Rendezvous and Proximity Operations. So Austin is going to give us another demo on these specialty sequences, VBAR and RBAR, in Astrogator.
Now I'm going to be switching over to a different RPO mission. This one's going to be focused on utilizing the sequences in the RPO specialized RBAR and VBAR subfolder. So for this mission, just to give a little bit of context, we have an RPO mission. It's going to be targeting our target satellite, which is a GEO. In this case, now I'm behind my GEO, and we're going to start off over here. So we're going to start off on a VBAR offset about 1 kilometer behind my target satellite. So you can see for the reference, I'm referencing the VBAR, and in my initial state, I'm on the VBAR. If I just turn on that VBAR real quick, you'll see it's in the same spot as my RPO satellite. Go ahead and turn that off, just to illustrate where we're starting. And then the first thing we're doing in this sequence is do something called a VBAR hop. So I'm starting off at 1,000 kilometers behind my target satellite. Now I want to move to be 200 kilometers behind it. So that's where I'm going to specify with this high-level parameter over here, my final VBAR offset. So I'm going to start off behind my satellite, and I'm going to go to 200 meters behind it. And then it's going to ask what engine model do I want to use. In this case, I'm going to use a proximity operation engine, just accept that as the default. Who am I? I am RPO satellite. Notice this is the same name as my satellite in the object browser over here. And I'm going to be using a impulsive maneuver. Once again, you can use impulsive or finite for these sequences. And we're going to go ahead and expand the sequence now, take a little bit more in-depth look at what it's doing. So first off, in order to use this sequence, you need to be on the VBAR. So for all these sequences, if they start off the word VBAR, you're going to be on the VBAR. If they start off the word RBAR, you're going to need to be on the RBAR. Otherwise, these sequences don't work. And all of these sequences are going to need to have similar force models to our target satellite. You're not going to want to use these sequences if you have mismatched force models. We have a different subfolder for that. So if I just open those up real quick just to show you. If we go down to the RPO specialized RBAR and VBAR, these are sequences we're going to be covering. If you do have different force models, you're going to need to be doing stuff such as this RBAR force motion right here, or the RBAR differential forces. This is all about maintaining. We're going to need to be using different sequences if you want to be using mismatched force models. Okay, so for this, back to the VBAR hop, we're on the VBAR, we're off this target satellite. We're going to perform a burn to do a radial maneuver that's going to drift us towards our satellite. So we're going to do a hop towards our satellite. We're going to propagate until we hit the plane crossing, basically until we cross our next location on the VBAR. And then we're going to go ahead and stop. So that's what this VBAR hop is doing. The duration is going to be dictated by half of a natural motion circumnav. And let's go ahead and jump to that time. You also notice in this case it's about 12 hours, which corresponds to half a period for a GEO. So that makes sense. It's going to take 12 hours for us to hop over towards this target satellite over here. Okay, now I'm going to stop on the VBAR. Perfect. And if I just coast for an hour, our force models happen to be the same, so we should end up in right about the same location. Perfect, we do. So we're on the VBAR. We're 200 meters behind it. And once again, we would use those VBAR hops to get closer towards our target satellite without initiating in-track drift. Because if you initiate an in-track drift and you don't stop, you might collide with your target satellite and you'll be drifting along the GEO belt, which is typically not what you want to do. Instead, you want to typically hop either above or beneath it. And also, one other thing to note about the VBAR hop is the orientation, whether you go beneath or above the target satellite, all depends on your initial condition. So if you are ahead of your target satellite in orbit, you're going to increase your orbit altitude, so you're going to hop upward. So you'll basically drift back towards it. And if you're behind it, you're going to do a hop and you're going to go beneath the target satellite, so you'll catch up to it. So the orientation of this hop right here depends on if you start off beneath or ahead, or behind or ahead of your target. Okay, now we're here, we're on the VBAR, and we're coasting for a while. Now I want to enter into a natural motion circumnav. For this sequence right here, you need to be on the VBAR, as the name suggests. And we're going to have a cross-track component to it, which means if we do have a cross-track component to it, we aren't going to be crossing the RBAR, so the radial direction exactly above or beneath it. Instead, it'll have a cross-track component of 100 meters once it's at its peak sort of radial height. And then once again, the high-level parameters here are who am I? Make sure it matches RPO satellite name. What engine model would I like to use? In this case, I'm going to be sticking with Proxops engine, although since I am closer to the target satellite, it might make sense to switch over to the rendezvous engine. So you might have a proximity operation engine, which is used for the bigger burns, and then you might have a rendezvous engine, which is used for the smaller ones. But that whatever engine model you'd like to use, you can select here. And then once again, I can use impulsive or finite. In taking a look, you'll see that this sequence actually doesn't really propagate. The way I can tell that is this return sequence right here. If I actually go and select on it, it'll say accept profile bypass, which basically means I'm going to enter into a natural motion circumnav, but I'm really only going to perform the maneuver right here that gives me those initial conditions to enter into that natural motion circumnav. This return segment that says enabled, except for profile bypass, says I'm going to propagate for propagation or for targeting purposes. So I'm going to target my natural motion circumnav and I'm going to propagate for targeting purposes. But once I'm done, just go ahead and pretend I didn't propagate and only use that maneuver. So this sequence is actually only going to be a maneuver sequence, and it's going to enter into that natural motion circumnav. So if I go ahead and jump to the end of this sequence, you'll notice really nothing happened. Once again, it's because there's a finite maneuver here, and I didn't actually go anywhere. But if I go forward in time 1 hour, so I actually coast for an hour, you'll see that now I am indeed on the start of that natural motion circumnav. And if I zoom in, you'll also see there is a cross-track component here as well. The natural motion circumnav you enter is going to be centered around your target, and the location of the crossings, the V-bar crossings, is all dictated by your starting condition here. So if I'm 200 meters behind my target, it's going to center around my target, and you're going to cross 200 meters on the other side as well. So just take that in note when you are using the sequence. Okay, now that I'm actually already in my natural motion circumnav, I'm going to use a natural motion circumnav to V-bar sequence. And this says, where would I like to stop? So I need to be in a natural motion circumnav, and then I'm going to want to stop on the V-bar. And then which V-bar, if it is the positive V-bar, so if in the positive direction, it would stop over here on the plus V-bar. In this case, it's false. So it's going to stop on the negative V-bar, so it's going to go all the way around, stop on the negative, and then the same high-level parameters of who am I, the engine name, and the maneuver type. If I take a look at the sequence, once again, I have to be in a natural motion circumnav, and the natural motion circumnav has to cross the V-bar. So if I was in a natural motion circumnav which didn't cross the V-bar, which would be the case if I had started on the radial perhaps and entered into a natural motion circumnav with a cross-track component at my V-bar, this sequence is going to error. So don't use it in that case. So make sure you're in a natural motion circumnav that actually hits the V-bar or pretty close to it. And then from there, if we look at the sequence, it's going to propagate and continue propagating until I hit that stopping condition. And once I'm there, it's going to stop on the V-bar. So if I go ahead and jump to the end of the sequence, I'm actually just going to go ahead and coast an hour afterwards. Since the V-bar is a stable location, you'll see that I did indeed complete this natural motion circumnav. Again, the duration's all dictated by the force models here. In this case, since we're at Geo, it's going to be about a day for this revolution. So about a day later, I come over here and stop on the V-bar. I'm going to go ahead and propagate. Now we're going to introduce the V-bar to R-bar sequence. In this case, I'm going to hop to the positive R-bar. Same high-level parameters of who am I, engine name, and maneuver type. If I take a look at this sequence, you'll see it's actually a combination of other sequences. It's a combination of the R-bar to natural motion circumnav and a natural motion circumnav to R-bar. So it's actually two other sequences wrapped up inside it. So in order to use this sequence, of course, you need to be on the V-bar, and you also are going to stop on the R-bar, which means there's not going to be a cross-track component. That's why there's no high-level parameter over here. It forces the cross-track component to be 0 for this sequence. And I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end of this sequence right here. So I'm going to stop on the positive R-bar. You'll notice I do indeed stop there, radially above my target, taking this loop right here. And you'll notice also that the direction of motion is dependent upon if you are behind or ahead of your target satellite. So again, once again, if you're behind your target satellite, you're going to initially go downward. If you're ahead, you're going to initially go upward. So now we stop on our R-bar here. We're going to do a R-bar hop. This is similar to our V-bar hop, but now we're doing the R-bar. Right now, since I am 200 meters on the V-bar, my R-bar, it's for a 2x1 natural motion circumnav ellipse, has 100 meters. It's a 2x1 ratio, so 2 for the intract, 1 for the radial here. It's 100 meters above my target, so we're going to do a 50-meter hop. So we're going to hop from 100 to 50 meters above my target satellite here. And this is going to perform an in-track burn to basically do half of a teardrop to hop towards my target satellite. And once again, you do need to be actually on the R-bar in order to use the sequence. And if I take a look, it's going to perform a maneuver to do the in-track burn. It's going to propagate until basically I cross that radial R-bar again, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop. So the R-bar is actually not stable, so you don't want to coast for a while here, otherwise you're going to drift off of it. You need to use a maintain R-bar sequence if you wanted to stay there. But for this guy, since we're immediately going to get the R-bar and then do a hop, that's what we're going to do for this mission here. If I jump to the end of this mission, or not the end of the mission, the end of the sequence, you'll see that I did indeed do a hop, and I hop towards the target satellite. In this case, I'm kind of going backwards here. That's because I'm above my target satellite. If I were beneath it, I would do the other direction here. I would basically go forward a little bit. Once again, that's all dictated by natural motion here. And the duration of these sequences is really whatever completes that half of that teardrop motion. Okay. The R-bar to natural motion circumnav. So I'm still in the R-bar. Now I'm going to want to enter into a natural motion circumnav. Since I'm adding a cross-track component here, which you can see up here at the top, in this case I'm adding 25 meters. That means I'm not going to be crossing my V-bar, but everything else about the sequence is going to be the same. So I'm now going to enter into a natural motion circumnav, but I'm just not going to be crossing the V-bar directly. And if I were to take a look, you'll see that this sequence right here, it performs a maneuver to actually start me, similar to this one right here, the V-bar to natural motion circumnav. We have an R-bar to natural motion circumnav. We're going to perform a maneuver to start that sequence, but we're not actually going to propagate because a natural motion circumnav doesn't have a clear stopping condition, so it's just going to do that maneuver to put me on the natural motion circumnav. And if I go ahead and propagate 1 hour towards the end of the sequence, you'll see that I do indeed enter that natural motion circumnav, and that it has a cross-track component here. So I stopped up here, did a hop, and now I'm propagating, and it has a cross-track component. To continue that natural motion circumnav, I'm going to use the next sequence called a natural motion circumnav to R-bar, which is just going to continue along. And in this case, I'm going to stop not on the positive R-bar, but the negative R-bar. And I need to make sure I actually cross the R-bar in order to use this sequence and have already been a natural motion circumnav. Those are conditions we meet for this sequence right here. And then the same who am I, engine name, and maneuver type parameters. If I were to expand this right here, you'll see that it's going to continue propagating until those conditions hit, in this case the negative R-bar, and then it's going to perform a maneuver to stop there. Going to go ahead and go to that time. Once again, this is not a stable location, so even though I do stop on the negative R-bar here, I continue to coast until I hit it. It's not stable, so I'm continue to coast until I hit it, and now we're going to do something else. And to sort of end out this sequence right here, this mission, we're going to do a R-bar, which I'm on to V-bar. And then once again, this sequence right here is a composite of two other ones. It's the R-bar to natural motion circumnav and natural motion circumnav to V-bar, but there's no cross-track component here because a natural motion circumnav that hits the R-bar and V-bar doesn't have a cross-track component, so that's why there's no parameter here. The only really parameter or option I have is the plus V-bar. So minus V-bar is on this side, plus V-bar is on this side. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop. I'm going to get rid of that cross-track component. That's actually what this sequence before the natural motion circumnav to R-bar, it got rid of that. It has a maneuver right here, so it got rid of that cross-track component. But from here, I'm going to perform a maneuver to put me on the V-bar, and go ahead and stay there. So if I take a look at this, I already said it's a composite sequence right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to the end, and we're going to stop right here on the V-bar. And then if I wanted, I can propagate for 1 more hour, and you'll actually see that I'm just pretty much in the same exact location. So that's an introduction to the RPO specialized sequences for the R-bar and V-bar hops. I'm just going to add in a slightly different mission here where I switch out the V-bar hop with the V-bar approach and the R-bar hop with the R-bar approach. So let's go ahead and rerun that and show you the difference there. Now that I've switched out the V-bar hop with this V-bar approach and the R-bar hop with the R-bar approach, let's go ahead and look at this RPO mission here, and let's just note the few differences and when you might want to use these sequences alternatively. So if I go ahead and jump to the end of this V-bar approach right here, I'm just going to go ahead and jump to that time while we talk about it. Previously, if you remember, the difference right here is I did a V-bar hop, which was a single radial maneuver to start me off, did that natural motion circumnav, and then stopped on the V-bar. The V-bar approach, on the other hand, still has that final in-track offset, so I'm still going to go to 200 meters behind my target, but now I have a transfer time. Previously, it took about 12 hours for that transfer because it's just going to follow the natural motion circumnav, and that's what the physics dictate. It's going to be about 12 hours for that natural motion circumnav. In this case, I'm going to be doing a forced motion, and I'm going to be approaching the target along the V-bar. So I need to be along the V-bar to start, and not only that, I'm going to basically stay along the V-bar within a radial error in a radial error rate as I approach the target. So I have a transfer time of 1 hour, so you already note it is much quicker. So in order to achieve that, I'll end up performing an in-track maneuver and then a series of small radial burns on the way to keep me along the V-bar. I have a max radial error of 1 meter here, so I want to stay along the V-bar within a meter. If you look at this sequence right here, kind of zoom in, you'll see that it does have a couple peaks here where it's about to go off of a meter and then it performs a maneuver to stay on it. There is a radial rate error here as well. I'm just going to accept the defaults here, but it's going to stay along this V-bar. And then you can choose whether you want impulsive burns or finite burns. And then make sure this who am I matches my satellite name, and the sequence, if you do have multiple V-bar approaches, this matches the MCS name. So you might want to use this if you want to have a constant viewing angle of your target as you're approaching. If you want more control over the transfer time as well, and you really just need more control over your mission, and you don't want to do a V-bar hop, you're not too concerned about not being able to stop your satellite here. Perhaps there's favorable lighting conditions if I just stay along the V-bar as I approach my target satellite here. So you have more control, and you have the fuel, of course, to support the series of smaller burn maneuvers and the control to do so as I target my satellite. So this is a force motion instead of a hop. And you would typically do these approaches once you're a little bit closer to your target satellite. Instead of maybe if you're really far away, you might just go ahead and opt for a hop. Okay, so that is the V-bar approach. I'm going to really have that same end condition as earlier. If I take a look at the sequence, you'll notice it has a burn to start me off, then it propagates for a while, and then it has a burn to stop. This propagate for approach has a couple things inside of it, so I just want to highlight that real quickly. There are auto sequences called radio impulsive, radio finite, and in-track impulsive and in-track finite. This sequence is going to be using this radio impulsive and finite right here, depending on if I select impulsive or finite. But these are actually sub-sequences or auto sequences that are going to be coming with these RPO sequences. You don't necessarily have to modify these, but they do indeed reference these. So this propagate segment has stopping conditions, and it's going to be calling these small radial burns as it goes. And you'll see that right here if I were to click on one of these stopping conditions. It would run this radial impulsive sequence right here every time it's about to cross outside of those radial errors. Okay, the rest of the mission is going to be the same up until this R-bar approach. So if I go jump to this R-bar approach, it's going to be a similar story. Last time we did a R-bar hop once we are above our target satellite, In this case, we are going to hop along the R bar within some error. In this case, I'm going to leave it as 1 meter. So I'm going to try to stay along the R bar as I approach my target satellite, similar to the V bar approach. Now I have a transfer time instead of whatever is dictated by that half of teardrop. And then I also have this max in-track rate error. So now it's the in-track which will be drifting instead of the radial. So anytime I'm about to exit, too much in the in-track, I'll perform a small burn to get rid of that. And that is the R-bar approach here. I'm going to perform one initial burn if I open this sequence up, an initial radial burn here. And then from there, I'm going to keep on propagating. Every time my in-track goes out, I'm going to fix it. And then from here, I'm just going to match on that R-bar. And then once again, this is going to be calling an impulsive in-track burn every time I'm about to exceed my tolerance errors there, which is a auto sequence. So you don't necessarily have to go and edit those, but those do need to be pre-configured in order to use these sequences. So I'm going to go along my R bar and do a series of small hops effectively to get towards my target satellite. So if I jump toward the end of this mission, sort of towards the end of the sequence right here, you'll notice I did indeed have to perform smaller burns to reach this target satellite, 2 small burns right here. And then once again, you would want to use this when you want favorable lighting conditions, and you want to stay along the R bar right here. One thing to note about this sequence, the V bar approach and the R bar approach, is you can't go through your target satellite. So if I'm above my target satellite in this case, I can't go beneath my target satellite. It will error. You don't want that. And same for this V bar approach over here. If I'm behind my target satellite, I don't want to go ahead of my target satellite. That would cause me to come really close to my target satellite or perhaps actually intercept it. You don't want that. So these sequences will error if you try to go through the target satellite here. And one last thing in terms of errors, if you start off in a location that is not correct, so if I'm starting off on a V-bar and I'm not actually on, if I use a V-bar sequence, I'm not actually on the V-bar, these sequences are not designed for that, and often they will error as well. So just make sure you have the right initial conditions as we've described here when using the sequences. Okay, and if I just jump to the end of this mission, it looks the same as the other one. We just used a R-bar and V-bar approach instead of the hops. Okay, thank you.